So I joined Reddit, let's see, almost 6 years ago. I joined as a community manager, and I had no idea what that meant at the time. But I just loved Reddit, so I said yes. I've seen, I think Reddit had 5 employees when I joined, and we have about 55 now. We're actually up to 5 community managers, 2 of which are here. So, including, I'm going to embarrass him for a second. We have our first community manager outside the United States. Donal is here from Dublin. It's like his 2nd day. And then Alex, one of our longtime community managers, who actually was my intern, and for some reason didn't run screaming from all the people on Reddit, and is now our lead community manager. So it's really nice to have a full team instead of just one person now. So anyway, awesome. So I'm starting. I want to talk about how do you help your community evolve? How do you get out of its way? How do you encourage it? I mean, David was right. We really we want to put the focus on what our community members want to do. What do moderators want to do? What do people who are passionate about whatever subject, what do they want? It should never be about us, right? But there are some things you can do to encourage trends. There are some things you can do to catalyze movements, to just encourage and support people. So I want to talk about some of those and also kind of look at how Reddit has evolved from a link aggregator site into however you want to define it today. This is actually a staph infection close-up. It looks beautiful, doesn't it? It's horrible. Yeah. So this is just, I just want to show, I mean, Reddit's a little bit unique. It's been around for about 9 years. And, unlike a lot of things on the web, we've never actually had exponential growth. I mean, this is all linear. So Reddit's essentially doubled every 12 months, which, when you do that for 9 years, it gets pretty big. But we've never had that kind of hockey stick, huge spikes. And I think we've been really fortunate, because it's allowed the community to sort of evolve at a reasonable clip. This is how it started. This is the first screenshot of Reddit. The first submission to Reddit was the Downing Street memo, which is even more relevant today than it was back then. This is what it looked like at the very beginning. It's improved slightly design-wise, maybe, but not much. But it started just as a place to submit links and for people to vote. My favorite thing about this first screenshot. So this is the account of Alexis Ohanian, our co-founder. His account Nothing, and his karma is -1 because the other co-founder downvoted him. So the very first vote on Reddit was actually one co-founder downvoting the other one in the same room, which is really awkward because he knew who did it, right? There's only one other user. So then, then over the years it sort of evolved. We started adding comments, and I'm not making this up. We didn't plan this. The very first comment on Reddit was someone complaining about, like, well, there goes the site. Right, it was just complaining about, oh, now we have comments. Oh God, it's, the death of Reddit is near. And you can see, so we improved it a little bit. We changed up the voting a little bit. Actually, the very first, before there was upvotes and downvotes, originally it was going to be interesting or boring, which I think is probably sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we would have had interesting or boring instead of upvote and downvote. And then this is actually our NFL subreddit recently, right? So this is the same, the same basic Reddit structure, except some really talented CSS programmers and people with design skills have actually made it look halfway decent. All right, so this is done by our volunteer moderators, and it's for the NFL draft. This is actually last year's draft. Sorry if anyone is going to call me out on that, but. They've essentially added an editorial calendar and editorial images for the draft. And they did that because we let them edit the CSS. And a lot of the things I'm going to show you in the next few minutes here are because we let users edit the CSS. Now, when you really think about what that's allowing people to do, it should scare you. And when people first started doing it, it scared the shit out of us. Because they can change the site. They can change so much stuff. You know, they can change the way voting functions. They can change the way names are displayed. They can change the top navigation. They can change with ads. They can change with our Reddit Gold payment buttons. They can cause a lot of trouble, and sometimes they have. But they can also turn they can also turn this into this. They can add, we now have a sort of badging system called Flare that was originally done as a CSS hack. So they've added Flare, they've added gamification, they've added user icons, they've added new navigation systems. They've added all sorts of innovative features, some of which we've then rolled back into the product. But I remember we had a very serious talk at the beginning of should we let users edit the CSS? And there was a lot of good reasons there are a lot of good reasons not to let people do that. But fortunately we did, and I think that's one of the reasons why Reddit is still around and hopefully somewhat relevant today. This is a subreddit makeup addiction. It's we get about 10 million page views per month. That's bigger than a lot of different beauty blogs out there put together. So people are just showing before and after pictures. They're talking about product. They're talking about different holiday things, fun theatrical makeup. It's a really great community. This is our history porn subreddit. You guys might recognize this building. One of the originally Reddit didn't have comments, and again early on there was some employees even who were wondering whether adding comments was a good idea or not. And this image here is actually one of my favorite comments recently on the site is about this image. I don't know if you can see, but the vehicle on the left hand side of the Flatiron building there is actually an electric car. The third one to the right, closest to the Flatiron building. It's an electric car. This is 1911. And so someone just posted this old picture of New York, and the comments got into this discussion about the early history of electric cars, about how big of a problem horse poop was in New York at that time, and why we don't still have electric cars today. And that all came out of started with a picture. And I think that's one of the really great things about comments, and it's also something that still I think both internally when we talk, or both everyone at Reddit, when we talk to outside people who don't use Reddit or aren't using the web a lot, it's difficult to explain. And I also think as an industry, community managers and people that work in social media have a tough time explaining is, why it's more powerful, why it's more interesting to learn about electric cars this way, almost by accident, by following this weird rabbit hole, than it is to just go to the Wikipedia page for the history of electric cars. I probably wouldn't have done that, to be honest. But because I sort of stumbled into it through this weird, rabbit hole, it's I don't know. It just has a lot more. It has a lot more meaning and impact, and I think that's something really powerful that is tough to explain to people. This is a subreddit for power washing porn. There's nothing pornographic about it. It's just before and after photos of power washing. People really like power washing. This subreddit gets about 2 million impressions per month. And I'll tell you one of my most frustrating moments was we were actually talking to a potential advertiser, one of the big box home improvement retail stores. And we put together this package where they could advertise to different subreddits for different products. That's the way our advertising works. And we suggested that they advertise one of their power washers on this subreddit. And they really wanted to know what the demographics were. And that was really frustrating because the demographics are people that love power washing. They essentially are comparing power washing to pornography. And you want to know, how many children they have and what their household income is. So that's something I'm sure you all have dealt with if you've interacted with today's leading marketers. Here's Photoshopbattles. It's a great subreddit. Putin is always a choice Photoshop subject. He's the muse of Photoshopbattles in many ways. The interesting thing about Photoshopbattles, so I don't know, recently, or a couple months ago on Reddit, we had 25 default subreddits. So that means if you come to Reddit and you don't have an account, or you're not logged in, you'll see the top things out of 25 different subreddits. We recently changed that to 50, which is, and a year and a half ago it was 10. So it's a significant increase in the amount of things we're putting in front of the majority of people that come to the site logged out. So we just put this Photoshopbattles subreddit on our front page in our default subreddit. And even on Reddit, you'll see a lot of people who talk about, oh, when you make a subreddit a default, that's when it turns to crap and it goes really downhill quickly and all this stuff. But I want to point out that Photoshopbattles, I think, has improved, or at least stayed the same. It's still very, very good. And one of the things that is that I would take away from that is that if you have something that's very clear and very sort of narrow in scope, it's competitive Photoshop. The increase in audience, the increase in participants, is not going to necessarily negatively impact the discussion quality or the submission quality in the same way that it might, if you put if you put the Toledo subreddit on the front page, that probably would go downhill quick because most people don't even know where Toledo is. But this is a very specific, very specific category that people can enjoy, and so it's worked pretty well. This is one of the weirder subreddits. This is a subreddit called Pics of Ian Sleeping. This subreddit, started off just with one guy trying to piss off his roommate by posting pictures of him sleeping. And at some point it got a following. And people were really, really excited to see updates of Ian sleeping. And Ian, they followed him. He developed a relationship. His significant other would sometimes make appearances. His parents at one point were angry about it, but then later submitted baby photos of him sleeping at a different age. And then he was in college, and then when he moved out for the summer, a lot of people were really concerned that something had happened to Ian. And he had to come on and say, like, no, I'm fine, I just moved back home. But this, something like this is really interesting for us because it of course, spawned sort of copycats. So we soon had all sorts of subreddit that were pics of so-and-so sleeping. My favorite being an Irish one called Pics of Duncan Sleeping. But Duncan would often make videos where were not of him sleeping. But it's just interesting to see how this new, sort of format spread amongst people on Reddit. This is one of the scariest subreddits we've ever had. It's a subreddit called Counting, and in this subreddit, people count by ones in the comments. I kid you not, it almost took down the site. All right, so someone will count 1, and the next person will reply to that comment and count 2, and the next person will count 3. Seems innocuous. When it gets up to about 10,000, our sysadmins get alerts on their phone, and the site starts slowing down for everyone in the world. So this, and so here's something like, and again, this is one of these conversations we had, like, why don't we just shut this down? Other than it being embarrassing that, a subreddit where people count by integers takes the site down, like, why not just close this? Well, the answer is because actually, in this case, if you think about, once word starts to get around that, like, oh, this is taking the site down, and they're up to, they're up to 100,000, people start to get really excited, and they want to come in and participate, right? Who doesn't want to count together? So people came in, and actually, like, a bunch of people coming in and wanting to make the next number is actually like a really difficult problem. That's like a very difficult UX problem because a bunch of people are coming in, and then you have like false, this is the false tree of 113,201. There's like competing branches, and it just gets really complicated. So they actually had to solve some really difficult UX problems, and our engineers had to solve some difficult server problems, which now have made their way into other communities and other parts of the site, all because people wanted to see how high they could count. This is some photos representative of our marijuana enthusiast subreddit, Trees. And, the amazing thing about this is a user in Trees decided that it would be really interesting to know how high people were when they made posts. So they developed this highness scale that you see at the top. It goes from 0, which is completely sober, to 10, which is multi-dimensional thinking. And it's useful, in the context of the marijuana enthusiast subreddit Trees. It's useful because if someone just posts a picture of a rock or something and they're at 8, then you at least know where they're coming from. But that's silly. And all they did, all it was numbers and brackets after whatever your statement was. Really simple, nothing technical, just a sort of convention of text. Pretty silly, kind of funny, no big deal, right? Well, what if people started, instead of putting how high they were, they started putting how angry they were, or how sure they were that their answer was correct, or how tired they were, right? You can think of all sorts of ways that people could use this sort of number scale that was created by a bunch of potheads to enrich the conversation, to enrich their point of view. And so that's we really try to look at things that the community does as neutral tools. They're not good, they're not bad, it's just another tool that people can use in all sorts of interesting ways. And so even, I'll go back, sorry, even when there's something kind of silly, throwaway, like, oh, people are putting how high they are, we really try to look at it and see, like, okay, how else could this be used? Since it's the World Cup today, I thought I would give you guys a tour of some of our patriotism and international subreddits. This is from Murica, which is a subreddit of kind of over-the-top cornball patriotism. Really great. Ronald Reagan riding a T-Rex. In this subreddit, people do things like post beer displays, make fun of U.S. foreign policy, and then here you have a gentleman who just got his citizenship, right? And it's pretty cool thread. This, of course, is the Canadian version. Canadia. It's a lot of pictures of very, very large moose. And here's the Australia one. I warn you, this one is not safe for work. There's a lot of very colorful language. But and I say this only half-jokingly, like, we don't consider that Reddit has sort of arrived in a country until they start one of these satirical subreddits. And furthermore, like, we also look at, if you've been on Reddit, any subreddit of a certain size will have a circle jerk version of it, right? And so we don't really consider a subreddit, the test for a subreddit is, has it reached critical mass? Is it basically big enough that people are making fun of it? Right? And I think this is actually a really useful gauge. Like, if you have people making fun of your community, or making fun of other people making fun of parts of your community, that's a good sign. That's what happens, right? And this, I was reminded of this. I happen to live in Red Hook, down in Brooklyn, and we have like a charming little local neighborhood paper. And someone recently started publishing a satirical version, like making fun of that little cute, charming local paper. And at first I was angry. I was like, oh, this is annoying, But actually it was really great because it's like, okay, if there's something there, then there's something that needs to be satired. So very quickly I'm going to go through some of these other country subreddits in honor of the World Cup starting. This is the England one. England, they actually request, and I'm sure if it was technically possible they would make you do it, maybe later, they actually request that you sing God Save the Queen if you write them a message into their mod mail. Here's the German one, Schland. They have no downvotes. They don't believe in downvotes. Here is the Swedish one. Apparently, they're implying that the IKEA is nothing more than a Trojan horse that will one day overtake and enslave us all. So this actually prompted, of course, a response from their natural enemies, the Danes. Who let the Swedes know how they felt about that. This is the North Korea one. Pyongyang, it's not actually by the North Korean government, I think, but they just periodically ban everyone, including the employees. They ban everyone and they just delete all the content. And I've actually had multiple tech journalists names you would recognize ask me if it was real, which tells you what you need to know about tech journalists. But really fun subreddit. You guys are probably banned from there. I'm going to skip League of Legends, sorry. So here's another thing. I went recently down to Talladega for the NASCAR race. And that was because the Dogecoin community sponsored a car. They paid $55,000 in Dogecoin, a cryptocurrency that didn't exist last December, to put it onto a NASCAR car. This is very, very real. And again, this Dogecoin didn't exist in November of last year. And 6 months later, they've sponsored a race car in a huge national sport, and it was like on TV, and it was crazy. But this wouldn't have happened if we. So there in the Dogecoin subreddit, there's something called a Doge Tip Bot or Dogecoin Tip Bot, and people use it to sort of tip other people in that subreddit and other places in Dogecoin, which like each Dogecoin's like a 1,000th of a cent or something, and that was kind of fun, but it really started to, it started to mess with some of our servers because people were using it a lot, and it got kind of annoying. And secondly, like people are exchanging money with other users on our site in our comments. Like that gets fortunately we have really great lawyers, but that kind of makes their head explode a little bit, right? Like people are changing money through this cryptocurrency by basically hacking something into our comment system. I'm not sure how we feel about that, but we decided to sort of encourage it and see where it goes, and we wound up with this. And I just want you guys to all keep this in mind. Like I had a talk with someone at a big newspaper who'd been there, a really sharp person, been there for a long time, and I was explaining to them the different subreddits, and I was showing them the New York Giants subreddit because they were a big Giants fan, and I was telling them, oh, they're doing something for draft day, and they have like Throwback Thursdays, and they're doing this. And he said, like, where did you find these people? I said, I don't know, I didn't. He says, well, who are they? I have no idea. He's just like, this shouldn't work. And I want you guys all to keep that in mind. You guys all work, I'm sure, with all sorts of tools or your own sites or Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, whatever. Like, if you really think about what's happening, like this should not work. But it does. So please keep in mind like how magical some of these tools we all use are, and also like how they work because most people out there are just normal people trying to talk about what they care about and are decent folk, and it's kind of like the F train. Like it shouldn't work, right? That should go wrong every morning. A bunch of tired people cramming into a metal tube underground. But for the most part, it works out and we get where we're going. Thank you.